Time for another game theory video. Remember, if you like these kind of videos, sub to the channel, like, silly comment, yada yada yada. It doesn't hurt. It's free. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about some concepts that I've talked about before in other game theory videos. And I'm going to talk about something that I showed off earlier today in stream when people were talking about it, because I really want to talk about how there's different aspects of nerds that play video games, and how when games are trying to cater to a very specific kind of nerd, the pocket protector nerd, the very mathematical, analytical nerd, video games have suffered because of it, instead of seeing the bigger picture that's just such a very specific demographic of people that play video games, and it's not seeing the bigger picture, right? Because making games constantly more pre-planned and predetermined, contrived, blah blah, the developers playing the game for you, deciding how the game should be played, is only making games worse, right? You would never see someone playing Super Turbo like they do nowadays and looking at their cliff notes before the match to see, oh, this is this move, this move does this is minus, blah blah blah. It's not how games work, right? And so let me show this example again, just that I was using on stream earlier, right? Let's look, if we were to look at this, if this was a new school game, right? Say Kai does boom, 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 he runs in, blah, 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 whatever he's doing, right? Maybe that's, let's say, again, for sake of argument, that's Kai's turn, right? This is plus this so many frames, I get to run in, blah, 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 blah. You got to hold that, right? And I'm going to use a new analogy that I haven't used before. I'm going to start calling things the monkey wrench. I'm going to use the monkey wrench analogy, right, that I used on stream. I'm going to start using that in videos, game theory videos, right? So Guilty Gear is a game that, even in something as simple as this, right? Blah, blah, whatever the fuck thing we're doing, right? Because Guilty Gear even has shit like, just defending, is it just defend, just block, whatever it's called, right? My turn, just right here, is already completely potentially different, right? The frame advantage is different. If the guy FDs, oh man, this is totally different, I'm pushed away. The math problem, just from something so simple, cannot, I say cannot in quotation marks, does not exist, right? Often, one of the things that people hate the most in video games, and inevitably fighting games are competitive, right? So of course there's going to be that kind of, that kind of aspect that makes you angry. One of the things that people hate the most in video games is when they cannot control something, right? They can't control something, and video game companies, and it's a psychological problem, it's a social problem, it goes beyond just video games really, but I guess this is a video game video, so we'll focus on the video game aspect, right? People don't like when there's something they can't control, right? And I've talked about, and that's something you can't control, right? That is outside of the math problem. Of course, there's a math problem like, FD adds so many frames, just block, whatever, takes away so many frames. There's still a potential math problem, but it's a math problem you can't control, right? And when we think about games and how preset, predetermined they are, the developers are really trying to make it so this is the math problem, right? This is where you have to guess. This is your only chance of guessing. You don't have a guessing game anymore. If you don't have a plus, or your jab isn't this many frames, you can't get out of this pressure the same, blah, 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 blah. You only have so many options. We played the game for you, right? And people really hate when there is an aspect of a competitive game that is not a math problem for some reason. And the people don't get that catering to that very specific kind of nerd, the pocket protector nerd, is just a specific demographic of a nerd that plays video games. Because people that play video games, the scope of this is bigger than that, right? And I've used this example for why Guilty Gear even succeeded, right? Because it was only surviving at one point. It went from surviving to succeeding. And I talked about the reason for that is because you could finally see the goodwill of Guilty Gear, or of Street Fighter and Guilty Gear, right? Because at first, as many of these nerds, these pocket protector nerds with their Dragon Ball Z shirts, whatever it is, they're just jacking off to anime with their waifu pillow, in the basement, whatever they're doing, right? As much as they want to believe that Guilty Gear was the most amazing game, Guilty Gear was not the most amazing game when it started off, okay? Guilty Gear was just another Street Fighter clone with a different vibe, admittedly, right? That's why it was able to get a sequel, because the first Guilty Gear was trash, okay? It had great music, cool vibe, totally different vibe, but at the end of the day, for as much wacky mechanics as it had, the game was busted as hell, and it really, and from a certain perspective, it really is just a Street Fighter clone, okay? Guilty Gear X, it looks great. I mean, it looked fantastic, right? You know what I mean? It basically looked like this from a sense, besides it has some more laser effects and everything. Sound effects are better too, I think, personally. But, you know what I mean? It's the same graphical system or whatever we want to call it, right? But even X, right? You know, as much as nerds want to talk about X was the greatest game, or this is serious, like, you know, whatever, even it's just surviving, right? It was just a Street Fighter clone that was surviving to get a sequel, right? And I've talked about how you need to make games easily digestible for a casual audience, right? When a casual audience looks at a game like Guilty Gear X, how do you make that game easily digestible to bring in the casual audience, right? Because when Soul, you know, I can't FGC in this game, right? But when Soul or Jam or whoever it is doing an FGC Infinite, how do you sell that to a casual fighting game fan? You can't. No one's gonna know what the fuck is going on there, dude. That's not easily digestible. Johnny doing a mistrap, Jam doing an FGC Infinite, or any character doing an FGC combo, running in and killing the dude. You can't sell a game like that. The only reason the game is getting a sequel is because it's just its own thing. It's like, you know, it's not actually succeeding, right? Guilty Gear had not succeeded, quotation marks. There's tons of games that have gotten sequels that don't do anything, right? You know what I mean? There's been tons of fighting games that have had sequels, right? So just Guilty Gear getting a sequel does not make it one of the most famous fighting games of all time, right? But when Guilty Gear finally went from surviving to succeeding, it was because you could see the goodwill of Street Fighter and Guilty Gear. And I made that video, and that was because what I was talking about earlier, which as much as nerds want to complain about it, that they hate this aspect of games that they can't control, they could see the Street Fighter in Guilty Gear. They could see a very kind of basic idea having a large influence on the match. And the video, what I was talking about is, say a character walking up and DPing you, a character walking up and throwing you in Super Turbo was extremely powerful. Such a simple thing had a very large influence on the match. Also, inevitably and you know, coincidentally enough, that is also not a math problem. It was also something completely out of your control. You can't guess if Soul does this, boom, he could actually just walk, he could do another DP, fucking, you know, caution to the wind. He doesn't give a fuck. Or, you know, boom, block, he goes for that. Whatever. You can't control when a character is doing a DP, throw, mix-up, whatever it is, right? But Soul then, and Guilty Gear XX was the perfect storm for Guilty Gear to become popular with the masses, because you saw such a simple combo, a simple sort of idea of what fighting games are, now had an influence on the match. Because let me make the dude not block here. I know I don't really have the dust loop in this game. You can do a couple of reps, but I mean, you know what I mean. You know, so Soul running up and DPing you, if I'm just doing this, that's not having a large influence on the match. But if you use the idea of Guilty Gear with it, so again, boom, you had RC, then boom, he chain combos, right? So first you saw the RC, right? It's like, oh, that's Guilty Gear. Or I would just say first, you saw the DP, Street Fighter. Boom, Guilty Gear. Boom, you saw a chain combo. Street Fighter guy doesn't really like chain combos, but okay, we've learned a little bit about Guilty Gear. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, jump cancel. Boom, 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 boom. Dust loop, whatever. And the dust loop is a link, so the Street Fighter guy kind of accepts it more, right? And of course, when you do that, it does a fuck ton of damage in Guilty Gear. And of course, the next time, if the guy were to block it, boom, 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 you go into a dust loop, whatever. And you're like, wow, dude, that is fucking Street Fighter, dude. I mean, isn't it? That's a core fundamental of what made, that's a core fundamental idea of what made fighting games popular in the first place. Such a basic, simple idea, a guess, not a math problem. There's no wait my turn, wait my turn, this is your turn, whatever the hell it is, memes, all this kind of bullshit for these jimmies, dude. The only time that is your turn in a video game technically is when you're picking your character on the selection screen. After that, your turn's over. Now you're playing the match. You have your turn when you're picking your character. Now it's over, dude. But the point is, dude, you see Soul, a character that's actually in the competitive narrative of the game too, and that's why I've talked about often how it's in, again, we're kind of pulling everything together. Excuse me, why it's important to have characters that are actually good in the competitive narrative that can show off the game as well. Soul was a perfect storm. He was good enough in Guilty Gear XX that he was actually in the competitive narrative that you would see him often in tournaments, right? And for Soul to be effective, he had to use fundamental ideas, you know, in Street Fighter, dude. Run up DP, run up throw. That's fucking Street Fighter. But for it to be really effective for Soul, then you, of course, you know, you had to boom RC, and then you had to use an idea of Guilty Gear. So the casual player, it's very easy to digest because you're learning from a fundamental Street Fighter aspect that is very easily digestible. Step by step, it's teaching you Guilty Gear, the perfect storm, right? That's why games like Super Turbo are so fantastic, because it's so easily digestible. You can easily teach a casual audience about Super Turbo and what it's about, right? You see, again, who are characters that are in the competitive narrative? Two characters that are the complete contrast of each other. Sagat, Fireball, Dragon Punch, Trap. Very powerful, very simple idea, right? Very archetypical character. A character like Balrog, completely different than Sagat. A very volatile character in a volatile game. Could kill you very quickly. Throw loops. Supers, so he's abusing the system. Something that was new to the game at the time, right? That's a perfect storm. That's a perfect combination that makes Super Turbo still played nowadays. Besides the fact that it's, you know, the last Street Fighter 2 game, you know, technically, but you know what I mean? That's a perfect storm, because then when a casual viewer watches Super Turbo in a game that has so many archetypical characters, right? It's so easy to understand what Super Turbo is about. Just watching Super Turbo, even in, you know, high level play, you can easily find out what the game's about. That's why, again, a game like XX. Why did XX finally make Guilty Gear succeed when it was just surviving in a sea of Street Fighter clones? It went from surviving in a sea of Street Fighter clones to now being one of the most famous, one of the most important video games, fighting games of all time now. Because you could see the Street Fighter in Guilty Gear, and to see the Street Fighter in Guilty Gear, you had to learn Guilty Gear at the same time. It was, again, the perfect storm, right? But it also gets at the point that people don't like things they can't control. Specifically, this one kind of nerd that I'm talking about, like, oh, it's a guess, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if we think about games like Street Fighter V, they don't even want DPs to be invincible unless it's EX. Like, that's what I was talking about. Again, this took me a while to get into, the monkey wrench. This kind of specific nerd, the pocket protector nerd, who doesn't realize that they are not the only people that play video games, who want video games to just be a math problem. A DP, oh, this is my turn. You shouldn't be able to DP there. You know what I mean? This is my turn, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Oh, you got to weaken DPs. I don't like that, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, these monkey wrenches are what make games, you know, actually not a math problem. It's actually what makes there's like more of a mind game, dude. And every character has their own form of a monkey wrench. Well, not every character, but potentially, right? You know, lots of characters have different kinds of monkey wrenches that are thrown into the equation that keep the game not a math problem. They keep the game dynamic. They keep the game spontaneous, right? Free-flowing, right? They keep the game from being just so arbitrary. I'm not sure, again, my English is so bad. I'm trying to think of the specific words I'm looking for, but it's failing me. learning too many different languages at the same time, I guess, but you know what I mean? And even if we didn't have the monkey wrenches of something like that, again, we even just have things like FD, just defending, instant block, whatever it's called. Even that stuff, you can't control when a character is going to do that. You know, when you have so many different ideas of what characters can do, it takes away the math problem. And these math problems, you don't want games to have such core set math problems. It's not fucking healthy for a game, right? You know, I've also talked about why is Dragon Ball Z such a failure, right? You know, we're talking about how people hate when there's something they can't control. And it's because a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ is so hypocritical, because in a game that is so pre-planned, so my turn, your turn, yada yada yada, right? What is the one thing that is not pre-planned? What is the one thing that is not a math problem in that game when you're playing? And for a lot of instances, it's homing dash. Where am I going to homing dash? This isn't Dragon Ball FighterZ, but it's like, oh, I could homing dash here. I could homing dash here. Oh, you know, my pressure has to end after a hard, unless I homing dash, blue, 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 blue. Oh, but wait, I'm going to homing dash here, blue, 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 blue. And the thing is, homing dash is fucking great. The whole idea of fireballs versus reflecting versus, you know, the tug of war dynamic between fireball, reflecting, homing dash, all that kind of shit, it's great. But the reason homing dash is so annoying because, excuse me, every character feels like their best mix-up then, in a sense, is homing dash. Which then amplifies the idea that the game is standardized when we think like, man, every character is randomly opening you up with a homing dash, or they're randomly homing. You can't control it, right? It's a math problem you can't control, which is good from one perspective, actually. You know, as much as the Jimmy doesn't want to think it is. But it becomes a problem when every character has the same best solution to the math problem. You know what I mean? The same monkey wrench. When every character has the same monkey wrench, it becomes a problem. Right? Hopefully you get when, you know, talked about this stuff ad nauseum, I feel like. But anyway, so I just want to talk about the monkey wrench. Games being so pre-planned and predetermined and everything, and it's not good for games, right? You know, this is what keeps games healthy. This is what keeps games, you know, math problems are not the most important things of games. I don't even know the fucking frame data in this game. I know that sounds terrible, but I actually don't. Don't even fucking ask me the frame data in this game. I actually don't know. That just goes to show you, I don't know the frame data in Super Turbo. And again, I'm not saying this game is better than Street Fighter, because I don't think it necessarily is, but keep the goodwill of games, you know what I mean? Fuck all these constant trying to pre-plan the games to such an extent that the developers are playing the game for you. It's just terrible, but blah 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 blah. Remember, if you like these videos, sub, like, blah 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 blah.